rock and roll has never been, will never be, my favorite music. What rock and roll is, it's a blueprint or a foundation to get to what we really do. And what we really do is that we're in the business of public assemblage, wherein we hope we fulfill the primary reason for people coming there, is that they would have a good time.
Yeah.
It's pure and simple.
It's good
And
to
how many times people have said, well, oh, Instagram, what is it? Sociological, anthropological? I just want people to have a good time. And I don't think it's by hurting each other or maiming each other. And once you break that down, it means, well, this is the way I deal with my staff. This is the way I deal with the public. This is the way I deal with the guy climbing in through the window. This is the way I deal with the guy who's dealing heroin. This is the way I deal with trying to change somebody's musical appreciation. In the early years, what that meant was knowing that Jefferson Airplane would sell out the Fillmore, and that I wasn't pressured into being forced to put on something that I didn't want to put on, which is different now. I was able to put on Roland Kirk, or Buddy Rich, or Miles Davis, or Laura Nero, or a one-act play by Leroy Jones. And I did not create their music. I am not responsible for their success, but I should like to think that the Fillmores in this organization were to some extent responsible for bringing to the attention of the mass Caucasian public in America certain artists that they would not have heard because they would not have gone to Harlem, or they would not have gone to Divisadero Street. And that's everybody from Roland Kirk to Yusef Lateef to Charles Lloyd to the Leroy Jones play to Lenny Bruce, which was I presented his last show with the Mothers of Invention, to Chuck Berry, the Staple Singers, and if somebody now, of course, I'm not saying look what we did, but if we had a rock and roll act and we put the Staple Singers on it, and some kid may say, well, who are the Staple Singers? And if you're in the facility and you see, would you welcome please the Staple Singers, and you see 90% of that young white audience go to the Coke machine, or go to get a hamburger, or go to take a leak, and all of a sudden there's Mavis, grabs them. And if at the end of the show you hear some idiot and some guy saying very lovingly but very stupidly, he says, "Hey man, you hip to the Staple Singers, baby?" All of a sudden he's an aficionado. Before that he couldn't spell the Staple Singers. So you can't, rather than say, "My God, why don't you learn?" If 5 people out of 5,000 that it got through to them, and there's something other than duh, what a wonderful thing we did. Sure. So that there were 2 primary things that I think we did then. Now the headline groups are very powerful. They say, this is who else we want on the show, this is the sound system you use. Any promoter who says to you, I have the power to do anything I want now, is wrong. So we are Sara Lee, we are Kodak, we're Xerox, we're Detroit. The one organization that to some extent has a say is us, because I think hopefully over the years we've gained the respect of some of these groups. But if I were to sit here and say to you that I am totally in control of everything in my show, is wrong. But we try to retain some of it. Mm-hmm. So one of the functions, once you get past hoping you have a good time, you break it down to specifically 3 things. What do I do with the artists? And who is on that show? How do I treat the public? And how do I treat my staff? And it is in the other 2 areas where my other joy exists. In the early days, it was the packaging, putting Aretha Franklin with King Curtis and Tower of Power, and putting. I decided I wanted to present Manitas de Plata, the flamenco guitarist, and I put him in the film when I went to the Oakland Museum, and I rented slides of Chagall's stuff, and I put bed sheets on the walls of the film when I put the slides up. Then I put green ferns on the stage. So when you walked in, it was a Spanish mosque, it was a Spanish church. And Vila and Manitas walked in, and, and it was magic, and it was so. That's what we did with certain situations. Like now, 12 years later, I don't just ask you to come to an outdoor show. When you walk out there, it's Disneyland, and there's a castle because there are 5 English acts, and it says the British are coming, and the drawbridge comes down, and there's the headliner. So what do we do with, and whenever I say this, people misinterpret it. It says the promoter gets the cow off the field and gets him into the corral. Once the cow is in the corral, how do you milk it? Or how do you take the wool off the sheep? Well, once we book that show, which is the first piece of pride, how do we get you to enjoy? What happens to you when I take your ticket? Everything from how does security guard relate to you, to how we ask you to sit down, and how do we relate to you if you get out of line? And sure, somebody's going to say, well, Graham's an asshole, he's rough and tough. Sure, if you're selling heroin and I'm chasing you 5 blocks, I ain't going to be too nice. Or if you insist that seat is yours because you're 5 times bigger than the other guy, I have to deal with you. It is having to deal with a large public with a particular step of people, which is the most challenging thing. Putting on the show, selling the tickets, that's the producer, the promoter. That's the promoter. The producer is the guy that is there once I take your ticket. The key to that is that I am not Mr. Macy or Mr. Gimbels. That if you got a run in your sock, don't write me a letter. I'm right there. Or one of my guys is right there. If I say to you now, 12 years later, after some 7,000 shows, that I'm at every show I can. At the big ones, I'm always there. And if you really got a bitch, I'm here. I'm just here. That doesn't mean I'm great, I'm here. You better have something to say, schmuck. You know, and if you're going to stop me and say, hey, listen, Mr. Ram, I said, yes, yes, talk, schmuck. What do you got to say? I said, don't be like my son, who, when he was 4 and 5, had a classic. He says, Bill, and he says, Dad, Dad, and I say, yes. And whenever he got stuck, he'd say, what time is it? Which is a marvelous out. And I say, now look here, Bill, I say, yes. Well, you see, I wanted to come to the show, and you were sold out, and man, it was really a bummer. And I drove all the way from Sacramento. Who asked you? Did you know about the show 2 weeks ago? Yeah, well, I didn't have the bread in. I said, that's not my fault. We're sold out. If I let you in, you're going to complain it's too crowded. What about the other guys in front of the building? Fuck them. Just you? Just get you in one, the hell with the rest? I said, you're no different than... The point I'm making is, we're in the people business. We're in the people business. We don't sell suits. We don't sell meat. We ask you to come into that building. And then we got to relate to you. And we got to relate to the artist. And we do that with people. Now, I don't take your ticket. I don't turn up your sound. Other people do. Who are they? They literally work for a dictator in a democracy. Within that dictatorship, there is a tremendous amount of democracy, meaning that you think I should do something different? Tell me if you work here. Or if you don't work here. I have a right to make a decision to go your way or mine for one simple reason. I'm the boss. If you can convince me that I can live with your area being painted chartreuse, do it. But if you do it on your own without asking me, you better make it back to brown, because that's the way it was. Now, within that framework, we have a very open, democratic organization with a nudnik sitting here having the right to say no, yes. That's really the basis for the company. I can talk to you about honesty, I can talk to you about integrity, I can talk to you about compatibility, the key to everything. But what I really am talking about is that I have a set of principles that involve certain traits that I would like you to understand. If you come to work here, if you come to our show, I'm not going to say, this is who I am, and spend 9 hours of your time. If you come to work here, I don't really want to see your resume other than to be sure about your prerequisites if there's a technicality involved. If you're a secretary, and all I want you to do is type and take shorthand, I don't care how many companies you worked for. I'm concerned about your stability. I'm concerned about your honesty. If you walk in here and you're wonderful, but you happen to be a quadruple amputee, you can't be a secretary. But once we get beyond the point that you can type, you read and write and spell English, then I really get to, who are you? I don't care about your resume. And if it takes me 5 minutes or 5 hours, I'll get to that point. I may be wrong. I may make a mistake. That's the only way I'm going to hire you. So over the years, I've chosen people who have more than anything else, to me, the basics of what is necessary. Other than if you're a physicist, you got to know about physics. If you're a soundman, you got to know about sound. But once we get past that technical or administrative prerequisite, what do we really get to? Honesty, stability, compatibility. Compatibility. You can be just fine for you. You can be just fine for you. Can we work together with this madman?